Anna is here. Anna, you can go. So, it's a wonderful day in Munich. I hope Switzerland is wonderful as well. So, welcome everybody to today's Meet the Speaker with Professor Robert Winter. You're either watching or listening to the LinkedIn Live or a recording on one of our platforms. So I'm your host for today. My name is Karsten. I'm a CIO advisor across Europe. And with me today is Professor Robert Winter. Robert, can you give a quick introduction to the audience about yourself and some background?
Yes, for sure. So thank you, Carsten, and hello everywhere where you listen to us. And yes, it is also a nice day in Switzerland, but Switzerland is on many different elevations. So St. Gallen is on 2,000 feet, 700 meters. So it's a little bit colder and sometimes wetter than other other places. But I'm happy to join the talk here, and I'm happy to talk about a little bit about what's my background and what I'm going to talking about soon in Munich. Yeah, my background is business. I studied and did a PhD in Germany, and then after two short positions in Germany, I moved to St. Gallen, and that's now nearly 30 years ago. So St. Gallen is a place where you usually join but not leave, because it's a place of many opportunities, and it's the biggest faculty of business in all German-speaking countries. So there's a lot of options and a lot of opportunities to build a group and explore topics. In the Institute of Information Systems and Digital Business, where I'm with, I built up a group for a topic that is my favorite, was always my favorite topic, and that's the enterprise level aspects of IS. So everything that is not local, that is not use case driven, but which is a global concern for the company or even for the ecosystem, and goes beyond certain local aspects of IS. Mm-hmm. And the typical topics there is managing enterprise architecture, of course. That's a favorite that I share with Carsten here. Of course, also managing transformations, especially digital transformation. Also corporate data and analytics management, all these topics which you usually find in CIO office or which are somehow dealt with usually on the board level. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm doing in research. So we're a team that does research mostly together with companies, mostly in competence centers, together with many companies. And in teaching, I founded an executive MBA program back in the late 90s. That was the first program that was really focusing on change, on transformation. And that was a niche topic in 1998 when we founded it. Nowadays, it's a very prominent and well-known topic. So it's a quite successful program, and I'm happy that we started to deal not only with students and undergraduate and graduate students, but also with executive, because that's where we basically get interesting inputs and have nice discussions and also find the cases that we need for doing research.
Yeah. I think what I always loved about you, Robert, is kind of like your the strategic approach that you like from the get-go always had, and kind of like your research, as you mentioned, kind of like spanning across and really looking at enterprise architecture, transformations, really kind of like the big picture also. But doing it in a way that is tangible and usable. And I think a lot of your research is always based on working with organizations, enterprises, and figuring out what is working, what is not, and distilling kind of like best practices from that. So I love kind of like your unique vantage point there. What sparked kind of like your specific research interest into kind of like the analytics and the steering of complex digital transformation? It's the topic you will talk about at the Lean Leader Summit, and I'm very excited that you're coming to Munich for it. but what kind of like sparked your interest there, and what can people expect when they come join your session?
Yeah, I think what is new also for us, for our group, was a combination of analytics with steering committees. And the analytics topics was always one of our topics. So our first competence center for or managing data warehousing, that was in 1999. So there were a lot of, you usually have these technological innovations. There's new technologies, there's new concept, like once the data warehouse concept. And they need business and management digestion to be understood, to be well organized in a way to be somehow shadowed by an organizational and strategic approach that somehow fits with the technology potential and exploits the technology potential. So the analytics topic was always something that was on our agenda. The steering committee topic that became visible in the or prominent in the I think in 2013 or 2014 or so, when we have been tasked by the Swiss government to do an investigation into quite a big number of very large transformations that failed. And in Switzerland, we have this basic democracy thing. And if big projects fail, and there's reports about it in the evening news, then what people do is basically they write their representatives, and the representatives create an initiative. And so there was an initiative in the parliament which forced the government, the federal government, to do something about it.
Okay.
And that's something that probably should happen in other countries too. And we were fortunate to be tasked with that analysis. And that was very interesting for us, because usually people don't want to talk about failed transformations for various reasons. And we know all of these reasons, right? And but based on this task by the federal government, we had access to all documents, and we were allowed to speak with all participants. And so that was a unique opportunity to gather data and gather insights. And basically the Swiss standard for project management was changed afterwards based on this analysis. And the most interesting insight for me as a researcher was that in about 40% of these failure cases, and these were big failure cases with more than 100 million francs damage, so really big fails. And in nearly 40% of the cases, it wasn't project management or project execution that originated or that caused the failure, but it was a steering committee. And that was interesting, because there's not so much research and so much support available for steering committees, because we all expect that steering committees, well, that's senior managers, that's business owners, that's top managers. They don't need methods, they have experience, they know everything, they should know everything, and they make no mistakes. But our data really clearly showed that in around 40% of the cases, they were the ones to blame. And one reason was missing support, not current data, missing analytics, a gap between what information was there in the transformation project, this transformation endeavor, and how the information was presented to the steering committee, and how they were enabled to discuss it and make decisions. And this brought these two topics together: analytics as something that we were always engaged with, and the need to analyze how steering committees are informed in a large transformation project, and that there is a big gap between the data that would be available to inform them and the actual way they are informed. Because the actual way they are informed is usually PowerPoint. And that inspired me to propose this title of the talk, which is Analytics for Steering Committees Managing Digital Transformation Beyond PowerPoint. That is a background of that project or talk.
Amazing. I love how you kind of like have that unique insight with the research, and I think it's something, I mean, we as a CIO advisory at Lean 42, we also get like to see a lot of transformations and touch points, but it's always kind of like you come in as an external, which is already good and gives you kind of like some more points than like I think some of the internal. But you coming from a research institute gives you kind of like some more elevated access or some more insights, I think. So just a quick note here for the audience. If you want to ask a question, just type it in the chat here in LinkedIn. If we manage to come to it in the live session, we will. If not, we will just answer it later on and type in it. Or you come to the conference. The Lean Leader Summit is just a couple of weeks out in Munich, July 2nd and 3rd. We still have a few seats available. And then you can see and ask Robert in person more about that. But I will ask you already now, like some points. You mentioned kind of like a little bit the limitations or blind spots for the steering committee beyond PowerPoint. I sometimes feel, or I think there's also the term out there of like the watermelon effect, where you kind of like you report out on a PowerPoint very often. I've seen that. Yes, everything is green and we're kind of like good, but if you look inside, it's more kind of like the watermelon's like green on the outside, but reddish in the inside. There is kind of like things that the team know, or that like you mentioned, kind of like the data that like within the data, you could see that there is kind of like something not going. Is it really, or how much do you feel this watermelon effect when it comes to reporting is in play? And is it a something that is driven by kind of like the uppers on like their expectations, or kind of like from the what the status reporter are thinking that they should report up, or is it like something completely different that is kind of like the biggest blind spot or limitation?
Yeah, I would, of course, we all know this effect because it happens not all the time, but often. I wouldn't count these problems to the 40% steering committee failures, because when basically there is a technical misconception or a data misconception, and things that don't work well are reported as working well, that's not the major problem of the steering committee, because they're basically they don't have the insights they can use for decision making. So we would count these kinds of phenomena under the 60% where there went something wrong with project management, because then the project management didn't report in a way that was effective and efficient. And they either didn't notice the problems, or that somehow the problems got lost in the data aggregation. So we would consider that as problem or project or initiative management flaws, but not as steering committee flaws. Because if they get the input that everything works well, what should they decide? Because they're then happy, they have shorter meetings, and then go to the next issue. No. So the real aspects that count for the 40% of steering committee fails was mainly that the steering committee wasn't, they either constituted themselves too late, or they dissolved themselves too early, because a steering committee you need even after the project to make to manage the value created by the project. You cannot stop working when some solution is delivered, because you have to make sure that the value of that new solution is being realized in the organization. So they often started too late, they stopped too early. And one of the main problems was that the steering committee didn't understand really, or they didn't have a common conception about what this transformation is about. And they weren't able to translate their mission and their objectives into a project charter that was feasible. So at the end, they created missions impossible. And then even the best project management cannot save a mission that is impossible from the outset. So these were the main problems, and this is hard to support with tools and with methods, but you can. Like for example, there was this new developments that, for example, tools help steering committees to create in a systematic way a common perception of what this endeavor is about. And we've seen recently, quite recently, big failures again, not in the public administration, but with large companies in Germany, for example, where a huge project again failed due to the fact that the steering committee members didn't agree on a common vision and a common perception of what this is about. They had global conflicts. They had conflicts between heads of countries and heads of functions and heads of processes and shared functions heads. And at the end, there's a lot to do still understanding how steering committees work and support them in their work. And I will be talking about one dimension of it, better supporting steering committees. And that dimension is, in the first stage, matching the data that would be available, that could be available, with a question that the steering committee anyway has. So it's at the end some kind of matchmaking. Where do we get the data from? Well, usually from project management or change management tools like Jira or GitHub, because that's where the data are in large projects. And so the first stage would be matchmaking, making this data available by analytics that we have and that we are used to deal with, but for this new stakeholder steering committee. And the second stage is then, once we did some basic matches and we convinced steering committees to rely or to use these insights to explore further what additional data could we create on the one hand side, and also what additional questions could the steering committee ask. So based on this initial matchmaking, we try to expand the concept in two directions in order to really provide a more comprehensive support and try to avoid at least some of these failures that result from just being not sufficiently informed in order to make really effective and efficient decisions. And there's one case. So I cannot talk about all the cases that we're involved with, but there's one case that we can talk about, and that will be basically my main case, which I use as an example to present actual insights, actual data, and that case, that's no secret, is Otto in Germany, the big once mail order business, then e-commerce business, now digital platform. So huge transformation, huge systematic, fundamental change of the company, and they basically did this already for 5 years, and we were lucky to work with them, to have interviews, to do site visits, and I will present 1 or 2 use cases of the steering committee in more detail. I have another 8 examples in my backup, and yeah, that's basically the main case that I will talking about, together with the main concepts of matchmaking and exploring data to support steering committees.
Amazing. I really like, but coming back to kind of like what I like about you in general is kind of like your practical approach and also how you analyze and identify kind of like the issues with research, but then also coming up with practical steps to overcome those hurdles. So it's not just here, now I know that the steering committee is the issue, but okay, the clear why are we doing this transformation, and everybody agrees on that, and that's kind of like the direction we want to all go into is clear, is missing, and therefore the steering is also not possible. So let's start with that, and like as you mentioned, like matchmaking some other things with data that you might already have, or what other data might be missing, and coming to kind of like the data that might be missing, just a question out of curiosity from myself, and if there is somebody out here that watching to this and one has additional questions, feel free to post them in here as well. But my question is, if I look at the transformations that I've been guiding or part with, very often the hard facts, like you mentioned kind of like Jira or some other project management, like do we have like is all the staff there and are the milestones hit and things like that. That somehow is very often there and reported up. But things like how happy are the people that then have to work with the transform process or with the new platform you put in place or whatever it is, how is kind of like the happiness, satisfaction, how is also the internal, the people that are doing the work, how do they feel, like the whole people person aspect, and I think is very often missed, but is kind of like a good, or it's my perception, I'm not the researcher at this point, is missed with kind of like really gauging or measuring, and kind of like then it could be very often an early indicator that something is not going right because that common goal is missing, and which leads to frustration and things like that. So how do you see that, and what's your experience from what you've in the research?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I mentioned before this business engineering concept, and interestingly enough, what we understand as comprehensive approach to transformation and transformation management is basically linking strategic, organizational, technical, and leadership and cultural issues. So this, I think we can subsume it under these soft issues. The soft issues need to be an integral part of understanding and managing and guiding transformations. I totally agree. In the data, this is probably the most underrepresented aspect that we have. But we're working in that direction. So I agree, the Jira data, the GitHub data, they are usually technical, or their focus is technical. When we aggregate them, we enrich them, of course. We try to comment data. We try to classify certain data, or to make the user companies classify certain data. So, for example, what we did, or what our case companies did, is to try to collect not only technical information on certain user stories or epics, but also try to understand to which amount teams, tech teams, work on more production-oriented topics, or analysis-oriented topics, or explorative topics. So how they spend their time, beyond just asking them about completion of their tasks. And that gives first hints about, basically, for example, if we have parallel teams, if we have more complex epics or less complex epics, is the way how people deal with it, how much they have to communicate, how long they need for a certain technical issue. So we try to understand a little bit better how people deal with these aspects, and not only the technical core of it, but it's a long way to go. I totally agree. We have ignored this aspect in managing transformation often, and still sometimes do. But of course, for analytics, issues are hard to grasp. We're going in that direction. Some companies that we talk to going in that direction, and that's by the way also the reason for me to present in these kinds of events, like in Munich in July. Not only to talk about what we do, but also to get in touch with companies that are interested, because we need the companies and we need the practice experience for two reasons. One reason is, if we want to go in the direction of patterns, a more generic approach to support steering committees, we need just more data. Yeah? We need not only one case or 10 cases, but maybe something like 50 cases. And we need to expand our network in this regard. And the other aspect is, once we have, for example, patterns, or we have the core of a method, we need to try it somewhere. And so I'm also interested not only to learn from companies how what experience they have, and Otto was very, very interesting in this regard, because they were one of the first ones that did it 5 years ago. That was really totally new field. So we don't want only to learn about practices and what works and what doesn't work, but also sometimes, of course, we want to try ideas that we have and artifacts that we create. And we cannot try them by their own as a university. So we need this current exchange in both directions with company and administration.
Well, so that's why it's a good reason to come to the Lean Leader Summit, and that's I think for the audience there, they will get like way more nuggets out of your sessions than we were able to cover today. But I think it's also that personal connection that I always think is so important, to meet people in person and build like a connection, some trust, and then talk about, because you're looking for kind of like also people to engage with and learn from, and try some of your improvements. So that requires always kind of like some trust in both directions. And that's where I'm happy to provide the Lean Leader Summit. I think it's a great event for coming together and building connections, networks, learning, but also asking specific questions. So again, if you weren't able to get your question in here today, feel free to post it here, or talk to Robert directly at the Lean Leader Summit. We still have like a few seats left, but we're, I think, at 80% of capacity already. So it will be a good crowd. So
definitely looking forward to it.
yes, and I actually had to look it up, because I think we both met not at the Lean Leader, but like even before that, like 15 years ago or so. But I think the first conference, Lean Leader Summit, was 2016, where you joined. So you have quite some history with our conferences, and we're very excited to have you back.
Yeah, and the best thing is that in the meantime, we have even electricity on the railway line between St. Gallen and Munich, which was, I think, one of the last railway lines, international railway lines in Europe, which where still these diesel engines ran.
But it still is only one lane in some areas there, so we still got like way more to do than just the electricity. But I know it's already better to travel now by train. So exciting to have you. Thank you so much for the session today, and wish you a happy rest of your day, your week, and looking forward to welcome you on stage, Robert.
Really looking for it. Thanks for the interesting conversation, and hope to see as many interested people as possible to talk to and discuss with on the 2nd and 3rd July in Munich.
Awesome. Excellent. Then